No one in the village of Terni had ever seen the sky bleed before. On a warm morning in 1494, as children played near the stone fountains and merchants arranged their goods in the market square, a faint tint of red appeared on the horizon, so subtle that most dismissed it as the sun's trickery. But by midday, the tint deepened and small droplets began falling from the sky, lightly at first, settling on rooftops and cobblestones like scattered petals, only to reveal a shocking truth as their color darkened with each passing hour. This was not rain, it was blood. Women screamed as their laundry turned crimson. Men wiped droplets from their faces and hands, eyes wide with disbelief. And the priest hurried to the square, rosary clutched tightly, calling for prayer, for penance, for God's mercy, while farmers abandoned their fields, fearing contamination or divine wrath. The metallic scent filled the air, thick and suffocating, clinging to every surface, and whispers of sin and retribution spread faster than the droplets themselves, wrapping the village in a shroud of fear. Children wept as they touched the red-soaked earth, elders crossed themselves repeatedly, and even the animals recoiled, stamping the bloody soil with uneasy hooves. Nobody knew the origin of the phenomenon, whether it was a sign, a curse, or nature itself rebelling. But as the sky continued to pour its crimson gift, a creeping panic settled in every heart. The village that awoke that morning in routine and calm now found itself trapped under an unnatural sky, its people staring upward with terror, powerless to stop what seemed like the heavens themselves, condemning them. By the second day, the village no longer whispered, it trembled. The crimson rain fell heavier, soaking every rooftop, every cart, every cobblestone in a sticky metallic sheen that reflected the gray, angry sky above. Merchants abandoned their stalls as customers fled, clutching their children to their chests, while the priest ran between the houses shouting prayers and warnings. But his voice was swallowed by the rhythmic patter of blood from the heavens. The smell grew unbearable, a coppery tang that coated the air and made the villagers gag, and even the river seemed tinged with red as it carried the runoff through the streets. Windows were shuttered hastily, doors bolted, yet the droplets seeped in through cracks and crevices, staining curtains, tables, and bed sheets, leaving no place untouched. Rumors raced faster than the rain itself. Some claimed it was a divine punishment for secret sins. Others whispered that the plague of the previous century had returned in a new, incomprehensible form. And a few feared that the blood itself was cursed, carrying contagion with every drop. Children huddled beneath their mothers' skirts, trembling as the village dogs howled, their coats matted red, while men tried in vain to shield the fields and livestock, only to find their efforts meaningless against the relentless downpour. By nightfall, the square was deserted, lit only by flickering lanterns, their glow bouncing off the bloody surfaces, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to move on their own. Every heart beat faster, every thought churned with terror, and the villagers realized with horror that whatever this was, it would not cease until the sky itself relented, leaving them trapped beneath an unnatural storm that showed no mercy. By the third day, Terni had transformed into a city gripped by hysteria as the crimson rain refused to relent, and the metallic scent grew stronger, clinging to every breath and every surface, turning ordinary tasks into unbearable torment. People ran through the streets, dragging terrified children behind them, clutching whatever possessions they could carry, their faces streaked with wet red droplets that looked like blood from some unseen slaughter, while others stood frozen at doorways watching the sky pour its impossible wrath, whispering frantic prayers to saints who seemed deaf to their cries. The priest, once a figure of guidance, could do little more than call for silent repentance, his words drowned by the relentless patter on the rooftops and the gurgling flow of red-streaked water through the alleys. Livestock bolted, and the river, swollen with the runoff, carried a floating carpet of leaves and debris soaked in deep, unsettling hues that glinted like shards of glass. Rumors twisted into panic as some claimed the rain carried plague or poisons, while others feared the color itself was a sign of the apocalypse, a prelude to famine or death. Lanterns flickered against the walls as families barricaded themselves inside, doors creaking under tension, shadows dancing unnaturally in the blood-slick streets. Even the wind seemed tainted, carrying the coppery scent into every home, and a creeping dread settled over the village like a living thing, feeding on fear, convincing every heart that the world itself had turned hostile, and that salvation, if it ever existed, would arrive too late to save anyone beneath the crimson sky. By the fourth day, the village of Terni had become a theater of unrelenting terror, as the crimson rain fell without pause, turning streets into rivers of thick, sticky liquid that clung to the shoes, skirts, and hands of anyone forced to step outside, while the metallic scent choked the air and made every breath feel heavy and wrong. Windows were plastered shut, doors barricaded with furniture, yet the droplets seeped through even the smallest cracks, staining walls, floors, and faces alike, leaving a haunting mark that no one could wash away. Children whimpered in hidden corners, clutching their mothers, while men and women, desperate and exhausted, ran barefoot through the alleys trying to rescue livestock or salvage belongings, only to find the blood-red torrent unyielding, as if the sky itself had declared war on the living. The priest, worn and trembling, moved from house to house offering prayers, sprinkling holy water, attempting to shield the villagers from the unnatural deluge, yet even his presence could not diminish the growing hysteria. Whispers of curses, sins, and divine punishment spread faster than the rain itself, voices overlapping in fear and confusion, while animals cowered and fled, their coats matted in the red liquid, their eyes wide with terror. Every corner of the village reflected the chaos, the glow of lanterns bouncing off the slick surfaces, elongating shadows into monstrous shapes that seemed to creep along the walls. Panic gnawed at reason, and the villagers understood with a bone-deep dread that this was no ordinary storm, no natural phenomenon, but something alive and intentional, something that would not relent until it had claimed their sanity or their lives. When the rain finally ceased, the village of Terni emerged into a world forever altered, streets slick and glistening with the remnants of the crimson downpour, rooftops dripping with streaks of red that had baked in the sunlight, and every surface carrying the memory of the unnatural storm. The villagers stepped cautiously into the open, eyes wide with disbelief, hands trembling as they touched walls, tables, and doors still stained, their reflections distorted in the pools of blood-colored water that clung stubbornly to the cobblestones. The priest led a solemn procession through the market square, sprinkling holy water and muttering prayers that seemed almost futile against the lingering horror, while whispers spread from house to house of children who had fallen ill, animals that had died mysteriously, and crops that withered overnight, leaving the villagers convinced that the blood had left a mark beyond what eyes could see. Scholars later would attempt to explain the phenomenon, citing dust, pollen, or iron-rich rain, but the villagers who had witnessed it knew better, for they had smelled the copper tang, had seen it soak through every layer of fabric, had felt it drip from the sky onto their hair and hands as if the heavens themselves were punishing them. No one could forget the terror in the eyes of neighbors, the way shadows twisted on the walls, or the haunting memory of the storm that refused to end, and long after the river ran clear and the streets were swept clean, the fear remained, a quiet pulse beneath every glance at the sky, a chilling reminder that some mysteries of the natural world may carry a touch of the supernatural, and some storms leave blood where none should ever fall.